The answer, why the duplicates? And the answer is that throughout its entire history as a spoken language, Latin was in a continual state of change. A state of change from the hyper-complexity of the ancient Indo-European language that is its ancestor, towards the comparative simplicity of the modern Romance languages that are its daughters, languages like French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, and so on. Something that happened in Latin between about 200 BC and about 400 AD, or during about a 600-year period, was a gradual shrivelling away of the case system. For whatever reason in their spoken language, the Romans, and then Latin speakers in general, began to realise that these elaborate case endings were not actually necessary for being understood. They gradually found, and the emphasis here is on gradually because it took over 1,000 years to be completed, but they gradually realised that they could get by with something a bit like the system that we use in English, or that is used in modern French and Italian and the other daughter languages. And this is to have a reasonably fixed order of words and then to use prepositions to deal with any possible ambiguities. And because the case system was beginning to shrivel away, an increasing number of these endings were no longer distinguished. There were no longer any differences between them. And if they were redundant or tending towards redundancy, why bother maintaining so many different endings? The problem for us when we learn Latin as a foreign language is that the grammar we must learn is a snapshot of this transformation. The grammar of classical Latin, or the grammar of the written language, is the grammar of the language as it was broadly spoken by the Roman upper classes in the century or so before the birth of Christ. This was the Latin written by a series of very great Roman authors, men like Lucretius, Cicero, Catullus, Livy, Virgil, and so forth. Though the spoken language continued to change thereafter, the written language was now set in concrete and has barely changed since. Therefore, it's a bit of a mess. When you learn the ablative case, for example, you will see that this is largely meaningless without prepositions to make it clear what is being said. For the same reason, there are duplicated forms for both verbs and nouns. Therefore, the duplicated endings I have just shown. This was no problem for the Romans. They learned the spoken language as babies and the written language as young children. Native speakers can put up with any degree of irregularity. They can put up with any degree of chaos in the language. They barely even notice it. For us as outsiders, it's a nuisance. And there, in the least long-winded way that I can manage, is my explanation of these duplicates. Oh, I accept that explaining their reason doesn't in itself take away difficulties. Even so, it can, and perhaps it will, let you live more comfortably with them. If, however, you want to minimize the difficulties, here are 3 solutions. First, you must learn the endings for each of these declensions. You must memorize their endings. You must be able to reel them off from memory, ankilla, ankillam, ankillai, and so forth. You must learn these, and you must learn all the other endings as and when these may be revealed to you. Do not, I beg you again, say to yourself, I don't need to learn these endings. What I can do is guess them as and when I see them. You can't do that. It's not possible. Learn the endings. My second piece of advice, and this follows from what I've just said, is whenever you learn a new noun, you must also learn into which of the three main declensions this noun falls. If you don't do this, you will be confronted by words like mercatori. Look at it in the table on the left. This is the dative singular of a third declension noun. But if you don't know that mercator is a third declension noun, you may find yourself under the fatally mistaken assumption that mercatori is the nominative plural of a second declension noun. If you make that assumption, you will almost certainly not be able to translate the sentence in which you find that word. It is even possible, if you're sitting in examination and doing an unseen translation, that you'll mess up the entire translation because you have mistaken the case of a single word. So, when you learn a new noun in Latin, say mercator, do not simply look in your dictionary and find mercator and find that it means merchant and then slam your dictionary shut. If you do that, you've only learned half of the meaning. What you must learn is that mercator means merchant and that mercator is a third declension noun. This being done, when you see mercatori, you will know at once that it means to or for the merchant and not the merchants. My last piece of advice is to be aware of context. Context makes everything clear so long as you know when and where to look for it. Look at this sentence. Feminae tabernam intrant. A little while ago, I had a student translate this as the shop goes inside the woman. It doesn't mean that. It can't mean that. Oh, I grant that feminae is a dative singular first declension noun and also a nominative plural first declension noun. Seen as a word only in itself, it's impossible to decide which of those it is. But look again at the sentence. Tabernam is an accusative case. Intrant ends with nt, so it's a plural verb. More than one person is going inside the shop, therefore feminae is nominative. It must be nominative plural of the first declension. It can't be anything else. Think about that. Context is king.